leads to a lot of problems, and it leads to a lot of difficulties. It leads to a lot of attrition, people leaving the profession. It leads to a lot of misery and depression. And if I can just reassure you of something, I worked for 15 years in very challenging schools. That was my preferred environment. And for about the first 10 of those years, I really struggled with behaviour. Maybe first 5 or so. And for the first 3 years, certainly, I really struggled with behaviour. And I made every mistake in the book. And a lot of it was because I wasn't given much of an instruction. And I went to a good provider and I got a 45-minute behaviour lecture on behaviour management. So it really wasn't a lot for something which I think is crucial and fundamental to your practice. So in other words, my point is this: if you're struggling with behaviour, and maybe you're not, maybe you're doing great, good luck, what are you doing here? But if you're struggling with behaviour on any level, or you just want to improve it, don't worry, you're not alone. Many people are, and I certainly was too. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not a bad person. You're not incompetent. You're not a rubbish teacher. You might just have been not trained in something. And why would we expect somebody to be good at something that they haven't been trained in? Which is a bit of a recurrent theme when it comes to this kind of stuff I talk about. Let me explain what I mean. So about 4 years ago, I was asked by Nicky Morgan. Remember her? She used to be Secretary of State for Education. To write a review of what the most effective schools did to get great behaviour. This was coming on the back of a couple of other reviews I'd done for the DFE about teacher training and teacher behaviour and so on. And we basically found that there wasn't a lot of teacher training for behaviour. That was the first thing. The second thing we found was there wasn't a lot of teacher training for leaders either in terms of behaviour. So teachers and leaders weren't getting trained to manage behaviour. And some of them were brilliant, but they tend to be brilliant because of their own experiences and their own character and maybe the job they had up to that point. So they weren't good at it because of their training. And I thought this was something we need to rectify. So I wrote this report. On paper, I am the behaviour advisor to the Department of Education, but I stress this is an independent role. So everything I say is my advice, my thoughts, my research, my investigations. So this isn't like the DFE line on managing behaviour. Heaven forbid I should do that to you. We looked at about 200 schools up and down the UK. And we tried to find schools that were inclusive, comprehensive, and had great behaviour cultures. And we wanted to ask what they were doing. We wanted to ask what were schools doing where you were safe, where the corridors and so on were calm. The school was a calm place to be, and crucially, where everybody was treated with dignity. And I think that's really important for me. It's really important that all those three things combined. The schools had to be inclusive, which is to say they didn't just bin kids. I'm not anti-exclusion. I think exclusions are a very necessary thing sometimes, but you obviously don't want to run your school on that basis of, every time a kid misbehaves, you chuck them out. Otherwise, you'd have no kids left. Appealing as it sounds. And we wanted to look at schools that were comprehensive. And I'm not against other forms of other models of education, but I really wanted to find out what were schools doing with groups of children that reflected the environment in which the schools inhabited. And again, there are lots of schools doing great work in very non-comprehensive environments, but I wanted to see what comprehensive schools were doing. So those three things together were very important. Unfortunately for this session, and unfortunately in general for my report, the schools and teachers who were doing really well had a lot in common. And I want to stress here that what I mean by good behaviour, because it's really important to be clear, what do you mean by good behaviour? Good behaviour means when students do things which help them to flourish, both as human beings and also as learners. Let me be clear about this. Behaviour, good behaviour is much more than just sitting still and shutting up, right? But it's also not that either. It's part of that, because being quiet and being still and listening to other people is a really important part of good behaviour. It's important that children know how to listen and when to process and reflect and think and meditate on what somebody else is saying, or even just take a moment and think inside their own thoughts. Endless chaotic chatter and noise is not helpful for a lot of learning. Lots of learning is devastated by noisiness and chaos. At the same time, though, good behaviour isn't just silence. It's much more than that. It can also involve noise and structured, purposeful noise, the ability to speak and talk and take part in debates and take part in conversations and to give an answer clearly and speak to an unfamiliar adult and so on and so on and so on. Okay, so, sorry, I beg your pardon. So, you know, the ability to be noisy is also good behavior. In other words, good behavior means the ability to select the type of behavior you need for the moment that you're in. So it means versatility of behavior, which I think is very important. It means, you know, means being able to know how to react and respond in different situations. So that's what I mean by good behavior. William Glasser famously said that everything is behavior, and in the end, all that there is behavior. You know, because behavior isn't just one small thing. Behavior is everything that we do. So therefore, it suggests to me that good behavior is intrinsic to everything we want to try and achieve in schools, which is a point I make here. That whatever you think education's for, whatever you got into this crazy game for, whatever you're doing in a school, whether you think that, you know, children. Oh, sorry. If everyone could just please mute their microphones, because I can hear myself on reverb. So there's somebody there who's got. I'm listening to myself twice, and I assure you it's not pleasant. Thank you. If you think that schools are there for academic outcomes, and I hope that's part of your mix, if you think that schools are there for social benefits, well-being, mental health, creativity, social mobility, vocational opportunity, so on and so on and so on, whatever you think schools are for, whatever you're doing being a teacher, good behaviour facilitates it. And this is why I feel so passionate about talking about behaviour, and why I think it's absolutely core to getting it right as a teacher. Because it's not just some kind of bolt-on that you add on at the end. It's not just something like, you know, oh, my pedagogy is wonderful and I've sequenced my curriculum, you know, and I've read Daniel William. So, oh, I'll work out the behaviour policy. I'll work out the behaviour system later. No, your behaviour system, how you manage and direct the behaviour of other people, is crucial to everything else you want to do with them. So if you want children to be creative geniuses, you know, I mean, Shakespeare didn't just spring out of the mud. Shakespeare went to a grammar school, which in those days, you know, really meant something. Mozart was hothoused by his father to write his first opera by the time he was 5. Prince could played every instrument in his first 7 albums, but you know, this didn't happen by accident. They knuckled down and learned. You know, they didn't just muck about. Gandhi, if you want children to change the world, Gandhi went to University College London and trained to be a lawyer. So it just, you know, blows my mind to this day. And you know, famously was a very, very good student. So whatever kind of person you're trying to create through education, it's really important to know how to behave, because behavior means selecting the right behavior for the moment that you're in. I hope that makes sense. Now, what we found in the least effective classrooms, that the main strategy is to predominantly react to misbehavior. Now, what I mean by that is this. It doesn't mean that reacting to misbehavior is wrong. In fact, far from it, it's incredibly important that we respond and react to misbehavior. But if all that you do is react to misbehavior, if all that you do is wait for misbehavior to occur and then do something about it, then you'll always be fixing things that are broken. You'll always be putting out a fire once it's been lit. And, you know, I am very pro putting out fires. You know, I recommend that we put fires out. But if that's all that you do, the only time students hear about behaviour is when they're in trouble. And I'm going to suggest very, very strongly here, and this is really the heart of what I want to say to you, is that the most effective teachers and schools do something very different. It doesn't seem different, but it is. That one of their biggest strategies is to proactively teach the behaviour that you want to see. I pause for dramatic effect. Proactively teach the behaviour that you know the students will need to be able to do in order to flourish, in order to do well in that situation. And the irony of it is a lot of the behaviour that we take for granted because we're so good at it, like, you know, like being patient or waiting your turn, or sitting at a computer listening to somebody bark at you, they find very hard and we find very easy. And I'll talk about that in just a second. So rather than just think, you know, I hope they do well, think about what behaviour they need to do in order to be good students in your classroom, in order to be good members of a community, members of your classroom, and not just learners, but also human beings in your classroom. If you were to do any job in the world, an airline pilot or a heart surgeon, to pick 2 very common ones, you would expect loads and loads of pre-job induction training before you did the job. I mean, I hope you would. I mean, they don't just say to